We're at Masechet Pesahim, Daf Kaf Gimel 23, and we are right in the middle of this very sophisticated, comprehensive, and complex sugya, where we're going through, and by my count, 12 different topics, different isurei achila, things that one cannot eat, and trying to figure out, does that come along with a prohibition to have benefit, isur hana'ah as well. We went through 7 of them already. And mostly the conclusion is, we already know the conclusion. There is already halacha. There's machloket only in a couple of them. And so what we're really trying to do is figure out from all the details, what is a principle by which we can figure out how we derive it from the Torah. And so we're testing out 2 principles. One is that of Hizkiah, that differentiates between an active and a passive. If it says active, you shall not eat, lo tochal, then that means only eating and benefit is okay. Whereas the Abhu says, no, all verbs imply benefit as well, unless there's some reason that other reason that would say not to. The Abhu learns that from the fact that in all of the Torah, it says that just says prohibited to eat. Except in Nevelah and Terefah, there it says you can give it to a non-Jew, to a foreigner, to a dog, which sounds like only those you can derive benefit from it, and that implies that everything else you cannot derive benefit from it. Okay, we're going to come back to this a bit. So we already saw hametz is mentioned in the passive, just a quick review. And that is prohibited according to everybody in hana'ah. So that works perfectly well. We're actually going to come back to chametz all the way at the end. We have a kind of envelope chiastic structure here. But the second topic was unconsecrated animals in the temple. You're not allowed to take a regular animal and do shechita in the Bet HaMikdash, and that would be prohibited according to most opinions and to derive benefit from it, except for, according to the Abhu, according to the Yehudah, because he needs that pasuk to teach me the general rule, which we'll also come back to. Okay, third topic was haNasheh, and that's an active verb, but we said, even according to the Abhu, it's not prohibited because it's part of Nevelah. It's included under that category. There is opinion of Rabbi Shimon that thinks haNasheh is in fact prohibited for hana'ah, and so he would take the active verb according to the Abhu a straightforward way. Blood uses an active verb, lo tochal dam, but we said it doesn't matter. Even if Abhu would agree, you can use it, benefit from it, because it's compared to water. A limb from a live animal is compared to blood, and so therefore everyone agrees that that's okay also. Next is the killer ox. That's used in a passive way. If you do shechita before the ox is stoned, you cannot derive benefit from it, and everyone agrees to that. So really, so far we have chametz is clear, straightforward, and the killer ox is straightforward. Both use a passive voice, which according to Hizkiah agrees that means prohibited in hana'ah, and there's no discussion. There's no further discussion about that. There's no machloket. So we got those 2. Orlah uses a passive voice, and it is prohibited, but not exactly for the reason that it says of not to eat it, but rather because it says araltem orlato. It repeats the word orlah to counter the word lachem. So we have a new principle that anytime it says the word lachem to you, it means that it's yours and you can use it. This principle is going to come up in each of the last 5 cases. Okay, so that's what we're up to. And now we're going to start with terumah. And we know you can't eat terumah, but what about deriving benefit from it? Okay, any non-Kohen cannot eat terumah. That's an active verb. But what is the halacha regarding it? Mishnah Eruvin said, "Me'arevin lan-Nazir beyayin u'Yisrael b'terumah." If one wants to make an eruv techumin, you have to take a meal and put it outside the city, 2,000 amot outside the city, and then you can carry 2,000 amot from there in every direction. And this Mishnah says that a Nazir can use wine as his meal that he puts outside. Even though he's prohibited from drinking wine, he can still do that because, he can go to a bet din and say, I undo my vow. And so technically he there is a way he could consume the wine, and therefore, even if he doesn't do that, that could be considered his meal for an eruv. And similarly, a Yisrael can take a meal of terumah that actually he cannot eat, but he can derive benefit from it. This benefit that he can designate it as his meal outside. And technically, I guess you could undo that giving of terumah and say, I want to give something else instead of it. And so we see here that one is allowed to derive benefit from terumah. This is actually quite interesting because in general, you cannot derive benefit from terumah. I can't take terumah and start smearing it on my skin or burning it, or I can't consume or use terumah in any way. But this is a particular usage which does not diminish the terumah, right? I can't destroy the terumah because I have to give it to the kohen. But in this case, I'm designating it as my meal, so I go there and I could walk in any way, but I don't eat it. And then after Shabbat, I take it and I do give it to the kohen. So it's a way of benefiting from it that doesn't destroy it. Anyway, the point is we see that terumah is permitted to derive benefit, and that's a question to the Abhu, because he says that even an active verb means it's prohibited in benefit. So how are you going to answer that, Rabbi Abhu? Amar Papa, Shane hatam damar kera terumatchem shalachem teheh. Okay, so pasuk, it's actually not the same pasuk. This one was in Vayikra 22. Now we're jumping to Bimidbar 18, which is talking about the terumah that the Levi gives. When we, Yisrael, give the Levi, we give Ralph 10%. Ralph has to in turn give, there's no Kohanim here, has to in turn give 10, has to give terumah to the Kohen. So it's another type of terumah, but still terumah that goes to the Kohen. And here it says, v'nechshav lachem terumatchem, your terumah. So since it says your terumah that you give, that means it belongs to you in the sense that you can derive benefit from it, even though you're not allowed to eat it. And so that's why, even though it has a verb that says lo tochal, and usually that means not to derive benefit, the lachem here, shelachem teheh, teaches that you can't derive benefit from it.
The Levi or the Kohen, can the Levi or the Kohen derive benefit? If later on, if the Yisrael gives it at the proper time, can the Kohen or Levi derive benefit?
The Kohen can derive benefit from terumah, for sure. He can eat it too.
Even in that 1 hour?
Oh, no, it's not talking about chametz. It's talking about all year round. Anytime, anytime, yeah. Ve'idach terumatchem dechol Yisrael ka'amar. And what will Hizkiah do with this? Because Hizkiah doesn't need terumatchem. He says lo yochel is an active verb, and therefore it means only eating, not benefiting from it. So what is he going to do with the shelachem terumatchem? He says, I'm not going to do anything with that. This is just normal language. Terumatchem, the terumah that you give. It doesn't mean that it belongs to you. It's just that you're the one that gave it. So it's called your terumah. And so therefore he doesn't think that that's significant. All right, good. Now, what about Nazir? Because we just mentioned terumah together with Nazir. So let's see. Nazir amar meharsanim ve'azag lo yochel. A Nazir is not allowed to eat any type of grape product, not even the skin and not even the seeds. Lo yochel is an active verb. He cannot eat it. Utunan ma'avin la-nazir bayayin. And yet he's allowed to derive benefit from it, because even though technically he could undo his vow, but right now he didn't undo his vow, so he can't eat it. But he can make a eruv techumin with wine, and so you see he can't derive benefit from it. According to Hizkiah, that's totally fine. It's an active verb, so active verb means only eating, and so benefiting is okay. It is a question to the Abhu, because according to him, any verb means it's prohibited from consuming, from benefiting from it, and here he's benefiting. How are we going to answer that? So here you see, kol yemei nizra. So it's his nizirut. So these items belong to him in the sense that he can derive benefit from that from which he was prohibited from eating. That's one way we derive it. haNasheh suggests another way, but we're not going to like it. haNasheh amar kadosh yeh gadel pera se'ar rosho. Kadosh and davar acher kadosh. So his hair, he has to grow his hair, and the pasuk says his hair is going. Kadosh yeh. He will be kadosh. He will grow his hair. So we derive from that his hair is holy, and so that after he cuts his hair, someone can't take it and make a brush out of it or a pillow. You can't derive benefit from his hair. It is off limits. And so you see that only his hair is prohibited from benefit, but not anything else. That's Rav Asher's suggestion. But we reject this. Does it specify hair and nothing else? Rather, we'll go back to Mor Zutra's answer. Truth is that grammatically it says, like Kodesh. The Nazir is Kodesh. The Kodesh is going on him, his person. Gadel Peras ad Rosho, and it happens to be that his head. That's so too his hair, but it doesn't say anything. It doesn't say only that. It doesn't say nothing else. Okay, and so therefore we solved a Nazir one way or another. The next question is from haNasheh. Any grain that's from the previous year that you harvest, you're not allowed to eat from it until this day, meaning the second day of Pesach. When you bring the omed sacrifice, then you can start eating it. And so this is lo tochilu, is an active verb. Yet we see that we are allowed to derive benefit because the Mishnah in Menachot says, koser lashach atomachila behema. You are allowed to cut it early before it's quite ripe, and you can feed it to an animal. So there you go, feeding to an animal. You're deriving benefit from the hadash wheat, even though you are not allowed to eat it. So that's a question on Rabbi Abhu, because he says all verbs, even an active one, would suggest a prohibition to derive benefit. The answer is Amar Rav Shemaya Shanatam Damar Kera Kesirechem Shel Lachem Yihiyeh. So you have to bring the omed eshit kesirechem, your cutting. So therefore, you see, it belongs to you. You can't eat it, but it is yours, so that you can derive benefit from it, and that's why you can feed it to an animal. Okay, good. That solves the question for Rabbi Abhu. But now we turn it around to Hizkiah. Hizkiah, why do you need to say kesirechem? You already know. You never derived the prohibition because Yose said it's an active verb. So why do you need that extra word? So I don't derive anything from it. It's just natural, normal language. Kesirechem means the grain that you reap, that you harvest. It is you're the one harvesting it. It does belong to you, but that doesn't mean that you anything about deriving benefit. So they all agree that one can derive benefit from haNasheh. And next topic, creeping creatures. And now this is a passive verb, which means, according to both Hizkiah and Rabbi Abhu, it should be prohibited to derive benefit from it, according to that word. Utanan, however, there's a Mishnah Shivi'it which teaches Sayedeh chaya ve'ofot ve'dagim shenizdamenu lahem minin temein mutarin lemochran lagoyim. Let's say I'm fishing and I'm looking for some salmon, some tuna, and sure enough, in my net, I pick up some shrimp and lobster. So now what do? Do I have to throw it back, or can I keep it and sell it to non-Jews? Mishnah says it's permitted. So there you go. These creepy crawlies, I am allowed to derive benefit from them. This pasuk is actually about the specific 8 creepy crawlies, right? But now we're going to compare it to others also. Shanehatam damar kera lachem shelachem yeheh. So a pasuk that's talking about kosher fish and non-kosher fish. The second pasuk says if it doesn't have the 2 signs, then it's sheketz, an abomination. Lo tochelu. So even though it's talking about a different item, it uses the word sheketz, which is the same as that list of 8 creepy crawlies. And so you see all of them, it says lachem, they are for you, so you can derive benefit from non-kosher species of animals and creatures. All right, good. Wait a second. If you're telling me I'm allowed to derive benefit from all these things, then how come I can't do it on purpose? You see, the Mishnah just said, if I happen to be fishing or catching birds and a lizard happens to come into my trap. So it's okay, then I can sell it. But it sounds like only if I'm hunting for kosher animals, and b'diavad, if I catch some other things, I'm allowed to sell it. But what if I want to be a shrimp hunter, a lobster gatherer, right? What if I want to do that lechatechila? Can I do that? It says shanehacha damar kera yihiyu b'havayatan yehu. The pasuk further adds yehiyu here, right? V'sheketz yihiyu lachem. It adds in the second pasuk, and that teaches that they should remain disgusting for you. You should keep away from them, right? And so don't go on purpose and catch lizards and mice, but rather if you happen to catch them, then you can derive benefit from them, but you shouldn't gather them on purpose. Okay, now all that was made sense for the Abhu. Hizkiah, lama li l'michtav lo ye'achel u'maiti lachem lemishreyeh. So Hizkiah, why did you said, right, first it says lo yachel and this is lachem. So lo yachel means I cannot eat it, these shikatzim, and then it says lachem, they're your, they cannot eat it, cannot derive benefit because it's passive verb, and then it says lachem to say, oh, know what, you can derive benefit from it. Why bother? Instead, the Torah should have written an active verb, and then they would have known only eating and not deriving benefit. So I wouldn't need the extra word lachem to counter the lo ye'achel. Hizkiah says, oh, this is actually my source for my whole methodology, because that's precisely the point. That we'll actually learn from here that when it says lo ye'achel, then you would need a lachem, then you need a lachem to undo it. So therefore, in other cases where you don't have lachem, but you do have a passive verb, that teaches you that those are prohibited behana'ah. So I do need, in fact, one case at least to have that, so that I can derive my methodology in general from this one case. All right, good. And now we come all the way back to chametz. V'harei chametz. The Rachamana amar lo yachel chametz. V'tanya Rabbi Yose ha-Galili omer temah al asmecha ha-chametz asu b'hana'ah kol shiva. Okay, Rabbi Yose ha-Galili, he had an outlying opinion. He said that chametz is permitted to have benefit during the 7 days of Pesach. You just can't eat chametz, but if you want to do other things with chametz, it's fine. You can sell it, you can smear it. Other things are fine. You can burn it for fuel. So that's a Yose ha-Galili. This is the same sage who permitted eating chicken cheeseburgers, right? So he's having chicken cheeseburgers and with cooking them on his matzah fueled oven, chametz fueled oven. Okay, so he says it's permitted. Now, we question, why does according to him, why would it say lo ye'achel, which is a passive verb, and according to everybody, that means prohibited from benefit. So it says, shane hatam de'amar kera lo yera'el lecha seor shelecha yeheh. Same methodology as before, like lachem, it says lecha. This is, you should not see your wheat, your leaven, but it is yours, and therefore that teaches that you are allowed to derive benefit from it. Okay, so now what about Rabbanan? All the other rabbis who say chametz is prohibited from hana'ah, that's the majority opinion. What will they do about this? Rabbanan shelecha, they took that word lecha and use it for something else. Shelecha yata ro'eh, aval ata ro'eh shel acherim v'shel gavoa. The pasuk teaches that you are only prohibited from possessing wheat that is yours. But if it lecha, lo yere lecha, yours you cannot see. But if it belongs to someone else, belongs to a non-Jew, or shel gavoa, right, or before Pesach, I donate it to the Bet HaMikdash. So then I could have it in my house because it's not mine. And therefore it's okay. I can see it, right? I don't have to close my eyes when I see a pretzel stand, as long as I don't buy one. Okay, so that's what he uses lecha for. So that's a good question. Rabbi Yose ha-Galili, don't you agree with that? Veidach tereh lecha ketibeh. This says the pasuk twice, right? Lo yereh lecha, lo yimaseh lecha. So from the second one, he derives that you are allowed to derive benefit from it. It is yours for benefiting. All right, ve'idach, and now what the rabbi is going to counter to that? Had begoy shekibashto v'had begoy shelo kibashto. I need both of those lechas in Shemot Yud Gimel, because one teaches that not only am I allowed to have see hametz that belongs to a goy that I conquered, but also one that I didn't conquer. In other words, whether the goy is under my domain or not under my domain, it doesn't matter, right? Even if a goy is in my household and they have chametz, it's still okay. It's their chametz, and I don't have to worry about it. That's what the second lecha teaches me. Okay, now back to the Yose Gilidi. Say the Banan accounted for both of them, but you need one to teach you that you can have benefit. What are you going to do? Actually, there is another one in Sefer Devarim. There's yet another lecha regarding chametz. Good. But the rabbis will say, yes, I need all three. The third one is talking about se'or and one's talking about chametz, and I need both. Because se'or and chametz are not quite the same. Se'or refers to sourdough or starter bread. That itself is not edible, right? You can't eat that, but it's very strong, and I use that to make other things chametz. So on the one hand, I could say that's not edible. Maybe it would be permitted. No, that's why I have to say se'or. And on the other hand, chametz is edible, but it's not quite as strong in terms of leavening as the leavening agent. And therefore, I might think that chametz would be okay, and only se'or is a problem. That's why you need both pesukim, and has to say lecha regarding both. And so now we resolve the question according to both opinions. All right, so that completes the 12, and not exactly 12 because chametz is here twice. Here, according to the majority opinion, that all say prohibited because it's passive, and here, according to Yose Gilidi, when we take care of all the lechas. But otherwise, right, went through this whole list, and we see really only two are undisputed, just because it's prohibited, just because it says a passive one, and that's number 1 and number 6. And what we're going to try to do now is wonder if the Abhu and Hizkiah, their methodology, is it parallel to a Tanaitic machloket, right? And so sometimes we like to do that to see if they're amoraim, that their methodology, do we see it already in contested by Tanaim, and we're going to test it with Rabbi Yose Gilidi and Rabbi Akiva. The question that we're going to use for this is this pasuk: V'cheleb Nevelah v'cheleb Terefah v'yaseh lechol melacha ve'achol lo tocheluhu. So we all know that the Nevelah and the Terefah are not kosher. We already established those are the exceptions where the pasuk says you are allowed to derive benefit from them. You can give it Nevelah, you can give to a non-Jew. Terefah says you can give it to a dog. The question is, what about the chalev? Chalev, right? These are kosher species of animals. Chalev of a kosher species of animal is prohibited. This is special fat that goes, if it's a sacrifice, it goes onto the mizbeach and is prohibited no matter what. The question is that true only if it gets kosher shechita? If I do kosher shechita, then the meat is kosher, a lot of the fat is kosher, but the chalev, that part of that hard fat, is not kosher, and that applies to a kosher slaughtered animal. But what about if it's a nevelah? Then do we say a nevelah, the whole thing is not kosher, and it's all not considered meat, and the chalev also, you can use it, is permitted for use. And so that's what this pasuk comes and says. Yaseh lechol melacha. Yes, I can take that chalev and I can make soap out of it. I can smear things with it as long as I don't eat it. Okay, that's what the pasuk says. What we're going to discuss is how does this translate into the Bet HaMikdash. So let's see the two opinions here. Lema ketanaeh. Perhaps Rabbi Abhu and Hizkiah is in parallel with this Tanaitic machloket. Ye'aseh lechol melacha. This chalev of a nevelah can be used. Ma tamud lomar lechol melacha. Why do I need to say that? I mean, it's a nevelah. So doesn't nevelah mean already that I can use it? Also, it says lechol melacha, for all use. What's all use? Sheyachol limlechet gavoa yeh mutar, limlechet hejot yeh asur. Here's what I might have thought. Since chalev in general can only be is something that's sacrificed, something that is holy. So I might have thought, although it cannot be eaten, it can be used, but the use is only for the Bet HaMikdash, right? Only the Bet HaMikdash, they are allowed to use it for their uses, but not for a common person. The word lechol melacha teaches that anyone, I can go, I see that animal that's dead, and I can use it as well. Okay, Rabbi Akiva has a different derivation. Rabbi Akiva omer she'achol limlechet hejot yehet tahor, limlechet gavoa yehet tameh. I might have thought that if I use it, then it's fine, it's tahor. And the Nevelah, the Nevelah is tameh. However, this pasuk is coming and saying that this particular, the chelib, is tahor. It's not part of the meat. So it's tahor. I might have thought that's for common use. But in the Bet HaMikdash, no, then it would be tameh. Melacha teaches that even in the Bet HaMikdash, it's considered tahor. Bottom line, they both actually agree on the halacha. They both agree that I can use chelev from a nevelah in the Bet HaMikdash, and it's considered tahor, right? They both agree that about that. The question is, what are they assuming beforehand, and what is it now teaching? The assumptions are like this. He is already assuming that this is going to be tahor. The chelev itself is going to be tahor. He doesn't think you need a pasuk for that. He says it's needed to tell you that you're allowed to use it even in the Bet HaMikdash. Rabbi Akiva is assuming you can use it everywhere. But he thinks he needs the pasuk to teach you that it's also tahor. So their bottom line is the same, but they got there in different ways. Now, how did they get there in different ways? And this is where Rabbi Abhu comes in. The Rabbi Yose ha-Galili sabar lo tochelu mashma ben isur achila ben isur hana'ah. So the first, Rabbi Yose ha-Galili's opinion, he says lo tochelu. That's a verb that means both. It's prohibited in eating and in deriving benefit. That's the methodology of Rabbi Abhu, right? That all verbs imply isur hana'ah. V'chi ata kera lemishraya lenevelah v'hana'ah hu da'ata. And therefore, I need the kol melacha to teach me that, you know what, I can use it, because otherwise I would have thought that I cannot use it. And that's why he doesn't take that for granted. Okay, so he follows Rabbi Abhu. Rabbi Akiva sabar isur achila mashma, and Rabbi Akiva thinks no, lo tochelu is an active verb, and therefore that only implies a prohibition to eat to begin with. And so he's already assuming that that isur hana'ah lo mashma, that there's no problem with deriving benefit from it, and therefore when the pasuk says you can use it for any purpose. It can't be teaching me about benefit. It must be teaching that it's tahor in all places. And so they arrive at the same place, but they get there through different methodologies. Perhaps those methodologies are a parallel, Rabbi Abhu and Hizkiah's methodology. Okay, that would be neat, except that we would prefer if Rabbi Abhu could follow all Tanaim and not only one Tana. So that's what we're going to try to do, is actually answer that. Lo tekula alma lo tochilu mashma ben isur achila ben isur hana'ah. Really, Rabbi Abhu, who says lo tochilu, even an active verb, means both eating and a prohibition of benefiting from it. And he can explain their machloket, the different approaches to the pasuk, in a different way. Rabbi Yose ha-Galili sabar kishutra nevelah hihutra chelba v'gida lo hutru. So according to the Rabbi Yose ha-Galili, the regular pasuk, talking about nevelah in general, says that a nevelah you can derive benefit from it, but that's only talking about the flesh, the edible flesh of it. But chelev and legida haNasheh, no, that was not included in that original pasuk. And so and therefore we need this pasuk to tell me that chelev also is okay behana'ah. And that's why I said the chidush of this pasuk is that you can derive benefit from it everywhere, both outside and in the Bet HaMikdash. He says that the pasuk, the regular pasuk regarding nevelah, it does include all the parts that are in it, chelev and gida haNasheh also. So why do I need this pasuk that specifies chelev of nevelah? It's teaching me that, oh, it's considered tahor, even though the rest of the Nevelah is considered tameh. This part of it is considered the tahor, even in the Bet HaMikdash. And so you see that they're not arguing on what the word lo tochilu means, whether it means isur hana'ah or not. They all assume that isur hana'ah would be prohibited just with those words, but rather the question is only, does it include the chelib or does it not include the chelib? And I need the standard pasuk to include it. Okay, now a tangent, since you mentioned gid haNasheh here, and regarding the gid haNasheh inside a Nevelah, right? So we have a pasuk that tells us chelev inside a Nevelah is okay. How do I know that the gid haNasheh inside a Nevelah is okay? So maybe you think gid haNasheh in a Nevelah would be prohibited from deriving benefit. Obviously, you can't eat it; it's in a Nevelah. But how about deriving benefit? Well, maybe in fact it is prohibited, right? That is one opinion. That's going to be the opinion of Shimon. We'll see him in a second. That the gid haNasheh is prohibited to derive benefit from it. We actually already saw it to be Shimon's opinion back when we spoke about gid haNasheh. I can derive it with the kal v'chomer from chelib. Chelib, prohibited fat. If I do consume it, that punishment is karet, and yet that I am allowed to derive benefit. So gid haNasheh, which has a lesser punishment, all the more so it should be permitted to derive benefit. Okay, so that makes sense. Assuming that gid haNasheh is okay. But Rabbi Shimon says no, gid haNasheh is asur b'hana'ah, even if it's Nevelah. So Rabbi Shimon, what's he going to do with this kal v'chomer, right? Because this kal v'chomer seems to be convincing. Rabbi Shimon will refute that kal v'chomer. He can say, "Ma lecheleb sheken utar mikelalo esel haya." Tomar b'gid haNasheh shelo utar mikelalo esel haya. No, so it's quite different because chelib is permitted regarding in a chaya, in a wild animal, and whereas gid haNasheh is prohibited in a wild animal. And so you see, in that sense, gid haNasheh is more stringent than chelib, and so too maybe it could be also more stringent regarding the prohibition of making benefit. All right, that's a good point. So what's the majority opinion going to do with that? Since we were limiting our scope on behema itself, within the category of behema, our kal v'chomer works. So we don't have to, and that's all we're trying to prove. So we don't have to expand the scope to chaya as well. Okay, good. And so that concludes that section. We tried to do is say that Rabbi Abhu and Hizkiah parallel this machloket. But then we say no, not necessarily. It does not, in fact, have to parallel. Okay, and now we get to the conclusion of this whole discussion, which relates to Sam's question yesterday, which is they differ in their methodology. Do they ever disagree in an actual case? So that's the Gemara's final question here. Very nice. We brought all of these pisukim. We challenged Rabbi Abhu on all of them, and Hizkiah on some of them also, and we answered all the questions. Now, bottom line, is there any area in which they disagree? Behames bepesach v'aliba d'Rabbanan, beshor haniskal v'aliba d'dibrei hakol. Hizkiah nafek le melo ye'achel, v'Rabbi Abhu nafek le minevelah. So, even in terms of their method in which they derive it, they only disagree in two cases, right? Regarding Pesach, according to Rabbanan, in other words, the majority opinion that says Pesach is prohibited from deriving benefit. How do we know that chametz on Pesach, you can't have benefit from it? So, Hizkiah will learn that from lo ye'achel, it's a passive verb, and Rabbi Abhu will learn it from any verb, and he knows that any verb is prohibited because of Nevelah is the exception. So that's one. And Shor Niskal, that also is the one that everyone agrees with. It's because it says Shor Niskal, the ox that kills, is a passive verb and it's prohibited. All the other ones, either they're permitted or it's prohibited like Orlah only because it also says araltem orlato that counters lechem. So it's not we're not actually learning it from the verb directly. We're learning it from other words that were there, and everyone agrees with that methodology. And so really only number 1, number 6 are cases that they even have a different methodology than. But what about the actual halacha l'maaseh? Mikedi ben lemor asurin b'hana'ah. My benaihu. But they both agree it's asur b'hana'ah. So what's the difference between them? Any practical difference? Yes, there's one case in which they disagree. Ika benaihu chulin shenishchatu ba'azara. If I take a regular unconsecrated animal and I go and I do shechita in the temple courtyard, that's where they have a disagreement. Hizkiah sabar lo ye'achel lema'ute haneh oto lema'uta holin shenishchatu ba'azara. According to Hizkiah, he's going to see this pasuk that regarded Terefah, right? Don't eat any Terefah, lo tochelu, lakelib tashlichun oto, and throw it to the dogs. Now, the word oto is extra. Could have just said lakelib tashlichun. Oto, it comes and tells me that this Terefah is permitted to throw to the dogs, but only this. There's something else which is not permitted to throw to the dogs. What is that? That would be an animal that doesn't die in the Sedeh, but rather is killed in the Bet HaMikdash, and that I am prohibited from deriving benefit from it. So Hizkiah would say that that's prohibited. What about Rabbi Abhu? What would he say about that? Well, it depends. Rabbi Abhu, either he would agree, and that's if he follows Rabbi Meir, because according to Rabbi Meir, this pasuk regarding Nevelah, and this is ancient history from 2 dapim ago, right? But this regard, he said, Rabbi Meir says this pasuk from Nevelah says you can give it, sell it, give it to resident foreigner. It doesn't matter which way. And so for him, this is the exception that proves the rule. And so therefore, the pasuk regarding Terefah is extra. And so he can learn the word otah, and in the same way that Hizkiah does, that this teaches that cholin ba'azara is prohibited from hana'ah. And so according to Rabbi Meir, even Rabbi Abhu would agree with that. But there's only one case, Rabbi Abhu, if he agrees with Rabbi Yehudah, who says that this pasuk here regarding Nevelah is specific. You have to either gift it to a ger or sell it to a nochri. So I need this pasuk to tell me that very, very special halacha, how to distribute it. So it's not extra. And therefore, where is he going to derive his whole methodology that all prohibitions in the Torah are prohibited from hana'ah, except for one? He has to derive that from terefah, right? And from the word otah, this one you're allowed to give to a dog, but nothing else in the whole Torah. So since he needs this pasuk to learn his general methodology, he cannot use it for chulin sheba'azara. So that's the only case in which they disagree. Hizkiah and even Rabbi Abhu, according to Rabbi Meir, would say that the chulin sheba'azara is prohibited, but Rabbi Abhu, according to Rabbi Yehudah, say that chulin is permitted because he doesn't have anywhere else to learn it from. So let's ika benayu chulin sheba'azara. He's going to lo yachil mutahane otol mutachulin sheba'azara. Rabbi Yehudah sabar oto lema'utehane. He needs the word oto regarding terefah to limit all the other, everything else is prohibited. Chulin sheshadu ba'azara lav deoraita ninhu. So therefore, he's left saying that unconsecrated meat in the azara is not prohibited midoraita. There's a derabanan, but you can derive benefit from it midoraita. That's it. So after that whole thing, two different methodologies, there's only one case in which they actually would disagree. Halacha le'ma'aseh. Okay, we're almost done. I'm just going to introduce the next topic, but not complete it. Okay, this is now going on a completely different third path. We're looking for, we already saw two methodologies. We're going to look for a third methodology, different altogether from the first two. Yeteh bahu merabanan kamed Rabbi Shemuel bar Nachmani. Yeteh v'kamar mishemed Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. Minayin lechol yisurin shebat Torah, dechi hechi da asurin b'achila, hachinameh asurin behana'ah. Okay, so these rabbis are sitting and they're already assuming that all prohibitions in the Torah of eating also include prohibition against hana'ah. And they say, how do we know this? Right? What are they talking about? These two cases, which you already saw. Those were the cases that everybody that everybody agreed to. So minayin. Wait a second. It's like you're like showing up late to the lecture, right? We just talked about this for hours, and now all of a sudden you're coming and asking a question. How do we know this? We have many sources. Tepuk le me lo ye'achel. We can derive it from the passive verb. It shall not be eaten, right? So that's how we learn it. No, lo ye'achel isur achila mashmale. Isur hana'ah lo mashmale. No, these rabbis that were sitting before the Yoshua ben Levi, they said even the passive verb means only eating. Active, past doesn't matter. It's talking about eating. So eating is not allowed. Who said anything about deriving benefit? And so they disagree with both Hizkiah and they disagree with Hizkiah's approach. Okay, why don't we derive it like the Abhu does? Since Nevelah says that one you are allowed to give to the non-Jews, and therefore nothing else you can. No, he's not going to learn it from Nevelah because he thinks that you need the Nevelah pasuk to say specifically either gift it to a get or sell it to a nochri. So I need it for that purpose to know how to distribute it, but I can't learn about that from other cases. Fine, then he can learn it from the law, from the pasuk regarding Terefah, which the Yehudah does. This you can, right? Terefah you can throw to the dog, but nothing else, no other prohibited food in the Torah are you allowed to throw. You cannot derive benefit. Why not do it from there? No, he doesn't like that either. These rabbis think that cholin, that unconsecrated meat that you sacrificed in the temple, is asumid oraita. So they need the word oto to teach that. And so now they rejected Hizkiah, they rejected the Bethadal's of Abhu, but they still do assume that they know that there are these prohibitions that are asur b'hana'ah, and now they're left without a source for it. Minayin? Well, you have to come back tomorrow to hear the answer. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.